Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Beyond the Wire podcast. I am your host, Tim Keller, and along with me, as he always is, Mr. Matt Disher. Wanted to take a second and say, hope everybody had a fantastic Thanksgiving. To our Jewish friends, happy Hanukkah. I was not aware that Hanukkah had already started this year until my oldest daughter said something the other day, which then I got to introduce my three girls to Adam Sandler's classic, The Hanukkah Song. I sat there and sang along to it, and they all looked at me as if I was nuts, which I think is probably the appropriate response. Matt, you are familiar with the song, though?
I am familiar. The reason I'm laughing is because I recently introduced my son, my 10-year-old son, to that entire album.
Yeah, okay.
Or both of the Adam Sandler albums. So like Lunch Ladyland and
Red
all
Sweatshirt.
Of the things. Yep.
Yeah, my daughters and my niece, they know of Adam Sandler. They had no idea that he had ever tried to make music at one point in his career. So they were like, Adam Sandler sings something. I'm like, yeah, he's actually got albums. So
yeah,
there's sketches and skits and songs. That's a whole thing.
Yep.
So
yep.
But yeah, Matt, how was your Thanksgiving?
It was good. My sister-in-law hosts every year, and that's as much as I want to host people and I want to be able to like cook up a turkey and do all the stuff. I am always reminded when I go to somebody else's house how much work goes into all that.
Yeah.
And I am thankful that I have family members that enjoy hosting because I know my wife and I don't. And I think part of the reason why I like to host, part of the reason I don't enjoy the outcome is that I don't have a very good entertaining space in my house. So we're actually talking about doing some renovation to my kitchen.
Okay.
Because basically what you end up doing is sitting at the dining table, and that's the only place you can really go. There's nowhere else to like hang out in the house. The house is kind of separated in different segments, and our kitchen is not useful for doing 8 dishes at a time. So otherwise, great time. My parents got to come out. They kind of took it easy last year because of COVID, but they came out and joined my in-laws, and all the family members were there. And unfortunately, some of our extended family, my wife's other sister with her kids that are my son's age, could not come down from Chicago. Usually they're in town too. So my kiddo was trying to hang out and play with the teenage kids that still play video games. So they all are on that same level. But yeah, it was good. It was good. What about yours?
We were planning to have a Friendsgiving. My wife's best friend, we consider their family our family. So we were going to have them over for Thanksgiving, and her daughter is actually currently in the Air Force, and she was surprising mom and coming home for the holidays. And I want to say it was Monday of last week. Maybe it was Tuesday. Mom came up COVID positive, and then the very next day, dad, and then the next day, the son. The other daughter who's still at home, I don't think has tested positive. She somehow has a crazy good immune system, apparently. But yeah, they all became COVID positive, so we had to kind of cancel the Friendsgiving. So it was just my immediate family. My father came down as well. My in-laws actually went down to my wife's aunt and uncles down in Maryland. So it was a small group, and like I always say, if it was for 5 people or if it's for 500 people, my wife is an amazing cook, but she's always going to cook way too much food. We actually just, I think, polished off the turkey today, as a matter of fact, but everything else is gone. Pies, turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, all that good stuff.
Yep.
So, but overall, it was a very good holiday. I will say, the day before the holiday, though, yeah, that is terrible luck. Mr. Askren coming through with the comment on Facebook. It's just how it kind of goes. My wife had actually set me up for my COVID booster shot. As terrible as my symptoms were off the second shot, I was really pushing not to get this booster. I didn't want anything to do with it. But she set it up for the day before Thanksgiving, of all daggone days.
Ooh.
I had it in my head. Maybe I just won't go. I just won't go to Rite Aid and get my booster shot. And sure enough, I ended up, I cut myself at work, and I ended up needing stitches, but I cut it on some metal, so I needed a tetanus shot as well.
Oh, no.
So I had to go to Rite Aid for the tetanus shot, and while I was there, might as well just get the COVID booster. I will say, nothing like the second shot, though. I thought maybe my Thanksgiving was going to be me in bed, crying in a corner somewhere. But
Yep.
yeah, it was okay. I had some minor issues, but overall it was a
Yep.
pretty decent day. So
Good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Matt,
Well,
you had some
yeah.
interesting things happen within the past few days. So why don't you
Yeah.
go ahead and take the floor and talk about some of this stuff?
Yeah, I am good friends with a gentleman named Sergeant Dave Corlett, who is a Cincinnati police sergeant. He's been an officer for a number of years, and he is also the founder or director of the local or regional veterans alliance group, and basically it's a group of people. So you got to think about this a couple of ways. There's a justice system here in Cincinnati specifically for veterans. Like certain veterans might go to a special court, for example, or in this case, the Cincinnati Police Department is 30 or 40% veteran. And something that Dave and his group realized, veteran liaison group. I'm sorry, I misnamed the group before. Veteran liaison group for the entire Cincinnati region. And basically what this does is two things. I'd say, from a business standpoint, it probably acts as an ERG, like an employee resource group among police officers. As you probably know, policing is, it's a very stressful job. A lot of people go out of the military, go into law enforcement because they want to continue that line of service in one way or the other. And they still face some of the same challenges that they faced in the military as police officers, pulling up to a crime in progress or an accident or something along those lines. You're going to see things that you kind of drag around with you for the rest of your life. So Dave does a lot of this work, and he works along with the courts, tries to keep veterans out of the justice system, or veterans who are already in the justice system, tries to help them get out of it. And he also he's the boss for one of the downtown day shift lineups of police officers. So we had a shooting. We had a big shooting where a guy walked into our Fifth Third Bank office building on Fountain Square, central downtown, a couple of years back. And Dave was like one of the first 5 or 6 guys through the door to go after that shooter. So Dave also participates in other things, like when there's a fallen soldier or Marine or sailor, airman that is from this area. As you know, you've seen this, and thankfully we haven't seen many of these lately, but during the height of the Iraq and Afghanistan conflict, people were falling in action. And when they bring them back, they get, the full military procession with, buried with full military honors. And of course that brings out tons of police cars and supporters and fire trucks and things like that. So Dave will let me know when one of these is taking place. And I've ridden with him a number of times over the past few years when he goes out and does these things. And typically he'll pull a bunch of other Cincinnati police officers out and the motorcycles and everything. And Saturday or Sunday, I think it was Saturday, Dave sent me a message and said, "Hey, we're repatriating a KIA who was killed in action in 1950, December 2nd, almost to the day. December 2nd, 1950, at the Chosin Reservoir in North Korea. They're repatriating his remains." And so, the cool thing about this is that there's a group of people that work in the government that go after the remains of MIAs and KIAs, people who are missing in action or killed in action. In this case, this gentleman was killed in action many years ago. And I'm going to pull this. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Killed in action many years ago in Korea. And the hardship about this was that he was listed as MIA. His name was Corporal Kenneth Foreman, U.S. Army. He was listed as MIA. The way the story goes is that he was a member of Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 32nd Infantry Regiment, 7th Infantry Division. He was reported missing in action on December 2nd, 1950, after his unit was attacked near the Chosin Reservoir in North Korea. Following the battle, military officials said his remains could not be recovered. And then in July of 2018, North Korean Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un turned over 55 boxes, which reportedly carried the remains of American service members killed in action during the Korean War. The remains arrived at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam in Hawaii, August 1st, 2018, and then were brought to a DPAA laboratory for identification. So I guess it took a couple of years, but they identified Corporal Foreman as one of these KIAs. But the thing that struck me is this kid's from Mount Orab, Ohio, which if you look at my map here, this is the Cincinnati area, Cincinnati Metro. Mount Orab is out here. This is actually about a 33-mile trip as the crow flies, as a straight distance. So we had to drive from the CVG airport, Cincinnati Airport, which is down here to the bottom left near Hebron, and it was a procession of 6 police motorcycles, 1 Cincinnati Police Department car. The 6 police motorcycles, by the way, are the Cincinnati Police Department as well, and then several highway patrol cars, Ohio State Highway Patrol. It was just a really cool thing to be involved with, because here's the thing. This guy went missing 71 years ago. His parents, and probably his brothers and sisters, if he had any, never knew what happened to him. And it struck me as Dave and I were driving down the highway with our lights and sirens on, blocking traffic on the road and, running red lights on the intersection. It's kind of cool how this all goes down. We had the Patriot Guard riders, by the way, with us. So this is the motorcycles with the flags. It's very cool. A lot of them are Vietnam veterans. We drove this whole procession 33 miles or more out into, for all intents and purposes, Mount Orab is in the middle of nowhere here near Cincinnati. And these Cincinnati police officers are well out of their jurisdiction. So far that actually Dave's radio told him at one point in time that he had lost reception to the Cincinnati headquarters. He could no longer talk over the radio. So, it did it. We started talking about it in the car. It struck us that, here we are. We're out in the middle of nowhere. We're out in the country. And this kid left this place at 18 years old. He was missing in action when he was 19. This kid left this place 71 years ago, went missing. And because of the conditions of that battle, by the way, American troops were overwhelmed or outnumbered by Chinese and North Korean forces in that conflict. And the Allied forces tactically withdrew because of the conditions of that fight. It was very cold. It was mountainous. People were freezing to death. They were never able to recover his body until just now. So we thought about this, and here are his parents and his brothers and sisters, and he probably didn't have any kids, but if he did, his kids could even be long gone by now too. We thought about that here we are in Mount Orab, bringing this guy home 71 years after he went missing. It was kind of a touching moment, but a really cool thing to be involved with. And I think a lot of people don't realize when they're not killed in action currently in the current conflicts, a lot of people don't know unless they look at the news that this is even happening. And we've brought back, this is probably the 5th or 6th remains we brought back to the Cincinnati area in the last 5 years that I've ridden along with Dave. So there's a lot of this going on. There's still, from my understanding for Korea, there's still something like 4,000 U.S. or American troops that are MIA that have not been recovered. So pretty interesting thing to be involved with. Very touching moment. I got a chance to salute the casket as it was being taken out, and what family members did remain were there, and there weren't many of them. Not a lot of fanfare. The town didn't stop moving and stand on the side of the roads, which is unfortunate. But at the same time, we got a chance to be a part of that.
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, rest in peace to Corporal Foreman. It's good to see that you finally come home, and to Sergeant Dave and individuals across the country like him. That's something amazing that they're doing. And yeah, Matt, I'm glad you got to be a part of that. That is very interesting to be sitting there and riding along in a procession for somebody that, even had he not been, missing in action, probably no chance you probably would ever met this individual.
Right. Right. And I think, I'm a big history buff. So as we're driving along, I'm just thinking to myself, like, when this guy left to go fight in this conflict, none of what we're seeing, the road that we're driving on, the highways that we're taking, none of it was there. And how much has changed. And
it's a whole different world.
Yeah. Spiritually, this guy's being brought back to a whole world that he didn't know. But then I wonder, Mount Orab, again, it's a little bit further removed from the city. It's a more rural space. It's a nice place, but it's a rural space. I wonder how much that's changed in 71 years. It's probably changed a lot, but considerably compared to a major city, probably not a whole lot. Maybe the same buildings remain from when this guy left. So, on another note, I have asked Dave Corlett to join us on the podcast, and Dave is one of those guys, when he speaks, the room listens, but he arguably is very humble and doesn't talk much about himself. And so I've begged him to come on here because he's a great conversationalist and he has a lot of really cool stories to tell, having been a police officer for, I think, almost 25 or 30 years. I'm not exactly sure. But he has all these great experiences and a lot of very good perspective. And he himself is a Desert Storm veteran. So he served in combat in Desert Storm in the Army. And he was an aviator. He was on an aviation group, but basically he was out in helicopters in combat. It was pretty cool. It's better when he tells the story, but one of these days I'll get him on.
Yeah. Yes. Hey, Sergeant Corlett, we would love to have you come on the show there. So yeah, that I saw some of the photos you posted the other day on social media. I thought, that is a very, very cool thing, actually. So talking about veterans and the awesome things they do. I saw it on social media first, but there is an article up on military.com. A Navy veteran by the name of Oscar Rodriguez was recently gifted Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's personal Ford Raptor F-150 pickup. So I don't know how someone like Dwayne Johnson hears about someone like Oscar Rodriguez. But this individual in his post-military career has become a personal trainer. He has a lead role in his church. He helps take care of his 75-year-old mother and also helps prepare meals for women who are victims of domestic violence. So the guy's doing amazing work, helping out others. And somehow, word of this individual got to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and The Rock decided, hey, I love my pickup truck, and there'd be no better person to hand it off to than to someone like this. So yeah, there's some of the posts from social media. You see Dwayne rolling up, hopping out. He's going to a special screening of his new film on Netflix. He asked this gentleman to come up on stage with him, and then brought him outside and gifted him his new pickup truck. So yeah, it's a touching moment, and it's one of those moments where you're like, hey, one of the good guys finally got something,
right?
And to have someone like The Rock give it to you,
right?
Yeah,
I always love those stories. I always love these things where
I think I jokingly would have challenged him to, man, I can't take this from you. I'll arm wrestle you for it.
Right, I'll wrestle you for it right here,
like something like that.
Yeah. But it is cool. I've always said if when I ever became famous or wealthy to the point where I could, give things away like that, I would totally go into it. I think that'd be like the most rewarding feeling. And every holiday season for Christmas and stuff like that, my wife and I will do different donations, or we'll buy gifts off the trees and things like that.
Yep.
We support Toys for Tots, but up here at our school, at the elementary school, there's always the kids who need socks and things like that. And so we'll go up there and I'll pull a bunch of tickets off the tree and buy as much as I can. It's on a little tiny level, but I think it would be so cool. So rewarding is probably a better way to put it. It would just make you feel really good to be able to say like, hey, this person needs a car. Let me buy you a truck.
Yeah.
There are a number of YouTubers that my son watches who do things like this. Like, I cannot remember the one guy's name. His name is Juan, and I cannot remember what his YouTube channel is called, but he'll knock on people's doors and ask them how much their rent is. And they'll say, oh, it's $1,000 a month. And then he'll pull $1,000 out of his pocket and hand it to them. And they're like, what's this for? He's like, I'm paying your rent this month. Things like that. It's just these silly, it's these silly gestures of goodwill that allow, I don't know, it's got to be rewarding. And I realize like the YouTubers do it, that they're doing it for fame. Yeah. And of course, their fame leads to more money, which leads to them being able to give away more. But if that's their MO and they're doing it for the right reasons, man, get in, I think it'd be so
absolutely cool. Things like that. I can't say that one made me misty. I will say that the like people returning home after doing a tour somewhere or being on a float, being away from home for an extended period of time, and them coming home and like surprising their child at a basketball game, or it's dad gets to throw the first pitch at the minor league baseball game, and lo and behold, his son's the catcher, right? And he catches the pitch and pops the mask off, and dad just drops. That always gets me every daggone time, honestly. And
I hate going away for a night or two for work. I hate going away from my family. I can't imagine some of these guys and gals that go away for a year or 6 months or 8 months or whatever. 18
months. Yeah. Year and a half, sometimes on rotation overseas is.
Yeah. I mean, and you're missing your kids grow up, and then same thing when I watch those videos and like the little kids in elementary school and he's coming out of his classroom and hasn't seen his mom or his dad in 6 months. I can't imagine
standing
it.
in the hall.
Yeah, I can't imagine it. Those ones get me. Those ones do get me.
Yeah, I will say, I live in a relatively smaller town, so my children have had classes or been in class with some of the same kids all the way up through school, to the point where I want to say it was kindergarten class. My daughter was in class with this young boy named Marcus, and I think it was when she was in fourth grade. They had like a parent visitation day. I went in, hung out with my daughter in class, and that hour and a half or whatever I was there, they actually switched classes. So she went to a new class, and they had to line up out in the hallway, and they were going they were going to gym class, and this kid Marcus was standing there, and he recognized me from years before. And then that little announcement comes over the intercom: "Hey, parents, thank you for visiting. It's time to start wrapping things up. Give your kid a hug, say goodbye." So I gave my daughter a hug, and then Marcus looks at me and goes, "I'll give you a hug." I'm like, "Oh, hey, yeah, what's up, Marcus?" But yeah, those parents coming home videos always get me every daggone time.
Yep.
Speaking of things that get me, there's a handful of movies out there that occasionally get me. But I'll be honest, Armageddon, the scene where Bruce rips the patch off and sends Ben Affleck back up the tube, and then he gets in the drill machine and he's over the video and he's talking to his daughter back home, and "I'm not coming home, honey." And I've probably seen bits. I'll flip it on every once in a while when I see it's on. I've probably seen chunks of it 20, 25 times, if not more. But every time if I see that scene, I'm like, oh, I'm sitting there trying to bite my cheek, or like, daggone, man, this scene, it rips at my heart. I can't stop it.
It's hyper realistic, especially now, especially these days.
Yeah, we bring this up because Michael Bay is puffing his chest out a little bit, saying he has successfully predicted NASA's attempts to kill asteroids and redirect asteroids. NASA has launched its DART program, double asteroid redirection testing, using one of Elon Musk's SpaceX Falcon 9 rockets. So, if you watch the Armageddon, I don't know if they're going to go out and get oil well drillers, that are working on a rig out in the ocean.
Is Bruce Willis going on this mission? Or,
but that's kind of essentially the same idea. They're going to send astronauts up at the asteroid, attempt to get close to it and redirect the direction of the asteroid, in case there would ever be an incident like this where there would be a planet killer headed our direction. But yeah, I thought that was interesting that an action movie director like Michael Bay is now saying, "I predicted this." Also, when the androids take over the world, he'll say, "Hey, remember Transformers?
Right.
I told you."
Right. And probably a number of other movies where it's like a what if, but so Armageddon and Deep Impact came out around the same time.
Yes.
And I don't remember why they both came out at the same time, but the premise was the same. There's an asteroid headed towards Earth. And if it's just my imagination or not, I don't remember. Didn't they try to hit one of those with a missile or something like that, and it broke into like 1,000 pieces and rained down on Earth? Or is that just my imagination? Did that not happen?
I honestly,
that was a concern that they had in the movie.
Well, that's the concern with Armageddon. They were going to just fire nukes at it, and I'm forgetting the actor's name. He was actually former NYPD or NYFD. Then the day of 9/11, Steve Buscemi. He plays that alcohol addicted, woman addicted guy on the movie who just everybody would really look past. But in real life, he's supposed to be some sort of genius. They bring this up in the meeting. We're just shooting nukes at it. We don't need these idiots going up there. And he goes, "Go ahead and shoot your nuke," and it splits into 1,000,000 pieces, and then it just rains fire all over the place.
Right.
So he broke that down for him and told them, like, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard.
Right.
But yeah, I always thought the same thing. It was interesting how two very similar movies, essentially same premise, came out right about the same time. I think somebody was shopping their script. Somebody else heard about it and goes, "Ooh, not a bad idea. I'll get one myself."
Well, and 20 years later, they brought out Greenland, which has Gerard Butler This is the one that came out last year,
Mhm.
and it is actually. So remember in the '90s, those movies like the Armageddons and the Deep Impacts, and this was back in the day of the Batman series after Michael Keaton,
Yes.
where with George Clooney, everything was like hyper. Like it was the new age of CGI. Everything looked really fake. It was So anyway, Greenland came out. I watched that when it came out a year ago, and it's the same premise. There is a giant asteroid headed towards Earth, and this is a planet killer. And it actually does. I'm not going to do any spoilers, but it actually does end up,
Impacting.
coming to the Earth, and it does its thing. But it's a story about Gerard Butler trying to get his family to this underground bunker that's been built that's asteroid proof.
Mm.
But it is 90% of the movie is them just trying to get to the bunker in Greenland.
Okay.
From the United States. It's a terrifying movie. It's kind of like one of those movies, post-apocalyptic, like the movie The Road. If you've ever seen that, where the guy and his son, it's a post-apocalyptic world where there are roving bands of misfits that are killing other people and taking their stuff. They are cannibals. Plants don't grow plants anymore. There's no animals alive. It's just humans trying to survive. And it's one of those movies where like, man, it's so realistic. It feels so realistic that you're just like, oh my gosh, what if this actually happened? Is this what it would look like? I love those movies. I love the realistic what ifs, the ones that are really well made. So if you like Armageddon and you like Deep Impact, also check out Greenland with Gerard Butler.
Yeah, I'll say I remember seeing the previews for it, but I did not watch it. But based off of your breakdown of it, I think I'll have to try to give it a view and see what I think. So
it's a good flick. It's a decent flick.
So obviously November hosts the Marine Corps birthday.
Most important holiday of the year.
Yeah, it also hosts a very secondary important holiday, Veterans Day. So at the end of the month, they're calling it Veterans Month now. President Joe Biden has signed 4 veteran reform bills into law on Tuesday of this week, calling for changes and part of the country's sacred obligation to care for military members and their families, even after their service. I want to say that the one action was for, I had it here. The first bill is Protecting Moms Who Served Act. It invests $15 million in new maternity care programs at VA facilities to help expecting mothers from veterans. There is also the Higher Veterans Health Heroes Act. We spoke about this a few weeks back, how certain states, certain organizations, healthcare systems, things like that, may not honor exiting veterans based off of their working healthcare knowledge they've accrued during their time of service.
Right.
And essentially having these people that decided they wanted to get into caring for people while serving in the military, it forces them right back to the starting blocks. And some people say, I don't want to run this race anymore if I have to start all the way over.
Yep.
If there was some way to transfer some of these skills and this knowledge I have and maybe start me up, I don't necessarily need to be the surgeon going in, but I should be somewhere up the ladder a bit, and we can carry on from here. So this is a bill that will hopefully help streamline some of these things and help separating troops with their healthcare skills who apply for open medical jobs in veterans hospitals. There's the Colonel John H. Mchugh Tuition Fairness for Survivors Act. This act will guarantee that children and spouses of veterans who die from service-connected injuries will get in-state tuition paid. So if you have a state school, essentially this will, pay the tuition for your children and your spouse if something were to happen to you while serving. And then the final measure will require the Government Accountability Office to investigate potential disparities in VA benefits that are awarded based on race and ethnicity. So, personally, I can't speak for this, but apparently there has been some level of difference on disability payments given out based off of race or ethnicity. And hopefully this organization and its investigative team will find ways to counteract that and get everybody on the same plane. Because, everybody serves. We all wear green or we all wear that blue. Everybody deserves the same thing when they get out. We've all earned it.
Right. I mean, if you're experiencing the same sort of traumas or experiences or noise or whatever your ailment might be, whatever causes your ailment, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you're from or who you are. A couple of things that you talked about up front, Tim, and yes, we've had this conversation before. That's one of the big things, especially in healthcare right now. There's a shortage of healthcare people. There's been a shortage of healthcare workers for a number of years now, and they're projecting that this thing goes well into the future. And, I for a living, I talk to people leaving the armed forces, and I've talked to a lot of people that are in healthcare, and they have that exact same answer when I talk to them about a job outside of healthcare. And I ask them, well, why not? You're a corpsman for 8 years. Why not go work in the hospital? And they're like, first, I don't want to. And I can't tell if it's a mixture of reasons, but they're like, first, I don't want to because I have to go back to school and do all of the stuff all over again. Now, listen, like, I understand. I've always said this. Not everybody in the military is a rock star at their job. Just because you're a corpsman doesn't make you a surgeon, doesn't make you a nurse. But there should be some sort of equivalency or a test-in process or something like that, or perhaps it's a board certification. I don't know, where you prove that you know enough about what you're doing that you can potentially fast track into a career like that. I've always said this, that I'll trust the corpsman in the backpack full of gear to put me back together after I've been in a horrible accident. Then, I mean, frankly, I've encountered different situations with EMTs off the back of an ambulance who didn't know how to put on a neck brace. I mean, one in particular, I distinctly remember this. I was in the Marines when it happened. I had to apply the neck brace to an accident victim because the EMT didn't know how the neck brace worked. And that was concerning, considering I have only first responder, like combat first responder training. That was all. That was it. That's all I knew how to do. And I already knew how to use some of the operational stuff. I'd given myself IVs from training from our corpsmen. So that's a huge disparity for any career that you do, 10, 20 years in the military, and you've got all this great experience, including medical experience. And then boom, you get out and sorry, you got to go through all the schooling over again.
Yeah.
That's absurd. Yeah. It's absurd. But the other piece of this is another conversation we've had on here. These types of benefits, the post-military benefits, the things we do for our veterans, this acts in and of itself as a commercial for the military in the future.
Yeah,
if we don't take 100%. Care of the people who have worn the uniform, nobody wants to join. Why would anybody want to join if you're not taking care of us on the back end? And so that's it's very holistic. I mean, from a benefit standpoint, from a career standpoint, that's what's going on in my world. It is, how do we get to the people in the government and say, hey, the DoD skill bridge program has got to be, we've got to educate commanding officers and approving entities across the board and make sure that they're allowing their transitioning service members to take advantage of those programs. Because if they don't, and they get out of the military and they fall on their faces, we're back to square one. And then we're not utilizing the full advantage of these different programs that have rolled out. So there's a lot to talk. There's a lot to unpack there. Probably not for this podcast, but I'm glad to see that there's constant movement. Every president, every administration rolls out new things for the veterans, as they should. America loves its veterans. America loves its military. Thusly, let's take care of them. And let's make sure that the future generations of young men and women who are signing up to put on the uniform know that they're going to be taken care of on the back end.
Yeah. We joke a little bit, from time to time, we're old core now, Matt. These kids get to qualify on the rifle range with their scopes and things of that nature, all those good things. But the reality is, we're working and attempting to make, and these policymakers are doing the same thing, attempting to make it better than it was when we had to go through it.
Yeah. Well, that should be the mission of every generation. If you look at a lot of the benefits that we've reaped, it was like the reason I talked about repatriating this Korean War veterans remains. That's the kind of thing. The Patriot Guard riders on their motorcycles are all Vietnam veterans, and the reason why the Vietnam era has, those veterans came home to nothing. They were literally spit on in uniform, and they have worked tirelessly. Although they are very humble, I've shaken their hands before and said, "Hey, thank you for your service. Welcome home." And they kind of shrug it off like, "Yeah, right." I do sincerely mean it, but I also think that some of them, they were so jaded by their response when they came home, by their reception, that they said, I'm not going to go take credit for anything, but I would like to make sure that the next generation of veterans doesn't have to face anything like this. So they had a responsibility to do that, and they did that for us. And I think that just the same, we should continue to do that for the next generation of up and coming veterans.
Yeah, you mentioned Sergeant Dave. Being part of the first Desert Storm. I think those Vietnam veterans, without a doubt, made tremendous strides, and with their efforts, made things so much better for people of that generation. And we're not that far, removed from that group, the initial Desert Storm, but even them coming back and those individuals just taking what the Vietnam veterans had already pushed for and just pushing even further. And now it's our turn,
Right.
So
right.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah, and for the sake of humor, I have to put this up because I always post this every Veterans Day, and it's a photo from Black Hawk Down, and it's got, his name was Eric Bana, I think is the actor. He was a Delta Force operator in that movie, and this is after they did this big gunfight in Mogadishu. And in the movie, they asked, his name was Hoot. They said, Hoot, or Hoot said, when I go home, people ask me, hey, Hoot, why do you do it? You're some kind of war junkie. It's somebody modified this and turned into a meme, and it says they want to understand that it's about the veteran discount and the free meal at Applebee's.
And if that's your reasoning for joining the military, any branch, I would highly recommend you don't join any branch of the military. Right. I just want to do my 4 years and get out, and I'm going to get a 10% off when I get my tires rotated and an oil change, and then once a year I'll get a free meal. It's probably not going to be a good fit for you.
Yeah, you're gonna save $200 over your lifetime, right?
Yeah, that's.
You know what though? I always tell people this, that I had no idea how much I was going to get paid when I went into the Marine Corps. I didn't know until probably 6 months in what I was actually supposed to be getting paid, and it's not because I just didn't know and didn't ask the question. It was almost like I thought about everything else. Like the reasons I joined were not because of money. It was never because I wanted to make any money, and I knew that I wasn't going to get paid anything. And so it was, I got a roof over my head. I got a bed to sleep in sometimes. And then, they're paying for my meals. So what am I doing with my money? It wasn't until later where I was like, I need a car. Then I got to figure out how to pay bills.
Yeah.
Arthur Ramirez dropped in that he did it for the free food too. So Tim,
I don't think Chow Hall Marine Corps food was really that great. Art, you know better than that. You should have joined the Air Force where you're looking for the good stuff.
We used to go over to Kadena for lunch.
Yeah, we used to eat at the air base over in Okinawa because that's where the good food was. And Art, we were stationed in Pendleton together, and he's originally from the LA area. So, let's be honest, on the weekends, he and I could go up to LA and have some actual good food. So
right. Man, I just remember, on Camp Foster in Okinawa and even Pendleton for some time, our chow hall was shut down, and they were renovating the chow hall. We had to walk a little bit further to the other chow hall. The new one was super nice, but the food was all the same. Now, when we were in Japan, going from Foster, like Taco Tuesday I think it was dog food. And so we'd roll over to Kadena and we'd show up, and the guy would ask, well, how would you like your hamburger cooked? And I was like, I can order made to order hamburgers here. And all the airmen, I'm not picking on you airmen, but all the airmen were like wearing pajamas in the chow hall, and we wouldn't dare. As I recall, you either had to be in appropriate civilian attire or in uniform.
Yep.
These guys were showing up like they were right out of a hangover, and they'd go in and get their medium well filet mignon and French fries.
Even on your worst of Saturday mornings, waking up from an all-nighter, if you showed up, not in proper attire, you're probably not getting in. Or if you got in, some staff sergeant's going to grab you up and tell you to beat it. So
So we complain about the food and the benefits, but I was talking to my son the other day because he was asking about MREs, and he's like, well, how do you heat them up? I'm like, there's this little chemical heater, and you pour some water, and then you lay it on a rock or something. Remember that? Rock or something.
Yeah,
it says it on the bag. A rock or something. But he asked, were those things good? And I said, Bud, they were terrible. If you were, eating Burger King or you were out to dinner at Outback or something like that, they were terrible compared to that. But when you were hungry in the field and it was time for chow and you've been running an operation for 24 hours, dude, don't even heat it up. I'd just eat it. I'd rip the package open.
I was going to say, 95% of those meals, I didn't even bother heating them up. I'd save the
No.
heaters and make MRE bombs later.
Yeah,
But
right. Or you wouldn't have time. You just wouldn't have time
Yeah.
to. You couldn't wait for the heat. You'd
Yeah.
just be like, "Oh, I got to eat because I got 5 minutes."
Yeah. It
But
really wasn't. I will say my kids have all asked me about it. My daughter is my wife is the daughter of a veteran. And he was around for C rations. So she's had C rations, she's had MREs. We've jokingly made the comment before of, one of these days for dinner, we're just going to go to the Army surplus store,
Yep.
buy a couple MREs and slap them. Here you go, girls. Who wants
Yeah.
the ham slice?
yeah,
Who wants the hot dogs? And
Right.
but
Yeah. We talked about doing that in a previous job of mine. We were going to have like a Veterans Day lunch, and we were going to buy a bunch of
everybody
MREs.
brings in an MRE.
Yeah. The problem was the company had to pay for them, and they're expensive. They're pretty
They
expensive
are.
to buy off the
Yeah.
shelf. And
Yeah.
so we got a handful, and we cooked up a few of them up, and people ate them. And the funny thing was, people were like, "This isn't that bad." I'm like, "Man, I said the
Imagine
same
if that's
thing."
all you had.
Right. The first couple of times I had an MRE, I was like, "These are pretty good." I had chicken chow mein. This is great, or chicken lo mein, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And
Chow
that
mein,
actually chow mein, and that actually became one of the least favorite MREs in the box. But at first, I loved it because it had the little crunchy noodles in it. And then after a while, when you'd go to heat up even the heater, the smell of the heater started to
Yeah,
make me
you're
sick.
just like, this is what? This is nasty.
Yeah,
I can't believe this.
I'm going to eat the pound cake, and I'm just going to go to bed hungry.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody got peanut butter? I got a pound cake. Just come on. And then
But it has to be shelf stable stuff. You got to be able to carry it in a backpack. It has to be able to get hot and cold, and you're laying on it and you're sleeping on it, and it's getting smashed around.
Just take the coffee grounds and dump them in and swish some water around your mouth and
I'd put them in my
put
lip,
them in your lip.
and
Yeah.
just and dip them until they would dissolve.
Yeah. You get a little caffeine kick out of it. And
Yep.
Yikes.
That's right.
Yeah. If
Stay
anyone
awake.
out there has not enjoyed the taste of an MRE, go find yourself some. They are probably about $20 to $25, at like a local surplus store, but they are an experience.
And you've got to get the real MREs. You can't go to like Cabela's and buy.
Yeah, don't get the freeze dried, stuff that the outdoor stores do, because those are, I will say, they are a step above.
I'm gonna share my screen here. This is what they should look like. This is from Amazon.
Okay.
They should look like this.
There you go. That's
the MRE. It says Department of Defense
I can't
at the
say
top
they
of
had
it.
the Asian beef strips when I was around.
I don't remember that one.
Yeah.
And I think that they've pretty much changed some of the stuff. But yeah,
That's
get
exactly it. That's the exact back there.
I'm scrolling down because I want to see if they recommend you should buy this. Oh yeah.
They have
frequently bought together.
Okay.
Let's see what's in here. This looks like an unwrapped.
Oh, it shows you the contents of the bag there.
Contents of it. Yeah.
So a bag of M&Ms.
A little chiclet gum.
I see some crackers, it looks like, there in the middle.
Yeah, I can't tell.
Maybe
crackers.
That looks like crackers, and that's probably either a cheese spread or a peanut butter spread there. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
One of those boxes is your entree.
I think the entree is actually in here. Santa Fe something rice.
Okay.
Maybe a pound cake, lemon lime drink mix.
Oh, okay.
You have a moist towelette. You have your toilet paper here.
Yeah. Do they still have matches in them?
I think that's a matchbook right there.
Okay.
I don't know what that is. Yeah. So there, it's
a full course meal. It's got everything you need.
These are going for $20 to $24 on Amazon. So
they still got beef stew. I see that one there. Beef taco, barbecue, chicken burrito bowl.
Oh, there's 26 options. This is
they've definitely changed the menu items up.
Ooh.
Chili mac. There you go.
Creamy spinach fettuccine. That wasn't
not a chance.
That wasn't one.
No. Maple pork sausage. Oh, they have some of the breakfast ones in there, it looks like.
Yep. Yeah. You know what I don't see is the 5 Fingers of Death. The hot dogs.
I was going to say that quickly became my go-to.
That was my favorite one, or chicken breast, and that was when I learned to like Tabasco sauce. I never liked Tabasco sauce, but I don't see that in here either.
The chicken was super rubbery, and the only way I could get it down was you would dump the little tiny Tabasco bottle on your chicken.
Yeah, I don't see Tabasco in here on the
jalapeno beef patty
on the picture. I don't see it.
No, unless that's a hot sauce packet, that little red packet, maybe.
Yeah, well, that's gum right there.
Gum.
You mean this? Maybe this is white and red. Yeah, I don't know. So
yeah, a nice little trip down memory lane.
Good times.
Yeah.
Good times. But yeah, if you want to go pick up an MRE, and
There you go.
I have often thought about like making one for my wife and just not telling her that's what it is and putting it on a plate and then saying,
I made dinner,
like, here, try this. Yeah, it's beef stew. Go ahead and give it a shot.
She's like, you did the dishes too? Yeah. So,
yeah, right.
Yeah, I guess best way to keep the weight off, if you just stock your home with MREs, you're probably not gonna want to go out there and grab too much food. Although it might just force you to go out and hit a restaurant, and you're probably not going to eat too well there.
Now, the other thing about eating MREs is that when it passes through your body and you have to go to the bathroom, because it's an MRE, you're not allowed to just go to the bathroom. You have to go outside in the woods. You have to do it. You have to use the toilet paper that is provided in the MRE.
Yeah, you need the full cycle from consumption to evacuation.
Yep,
that is the rule of MRE.
Yeah, you can't use modern amenities. You have to make sure that your hands are dirty while you're eating it.
Maybe put on some face camo.
Yep. And then the other thing that I always remembered from Camp Pendleton, eating on any range out there, first of all, it never rained in Southern California until you were training. And then it rained all the time somehow. Yeah. But otherwise it would be a drought. But it would rain on the military installation. And then every time you started eating, there would be those little tiny house flies that would show up. And they weren't regular sized house flies. They weren't big enough where you could get them. They were always real small and quick. And they would land on everything, and they'd just be in your ears, and they'd be just flying around. They didn't bite or anything. They were just really annoying. But whenever you broke out some food, these little miniature flies would show up and try to get, and they were fearless. So you'd swat at them. They'd just be like, "Oh, I'm just going to get into your beef stew and have a bite," And that's what they did. So,
yeah, absolutely,
full cycle, as you said, Tim. You got to do the whole experience. Take it outside.
When I said put on some face camo, it actually reminded me how many times I've been into the cracker, the pound cake, or the bread. And you look at it and you see some green or some bread, and you're like, I guess I'm eating paint now.
This is non-toxic, right?
Yeah. Like,
yeah.
We're just gotta go for it.
Does it add flavor? It would get on your teeth. You have like a black tooth.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
The last article we have pulled up off of military.com is about the MI6 spy chief over in Great Britain. He says that China, Russia, Iran, and terrorism are the four big threats to Britain and its allies. Excuse me. The MI6 chief, named Richard Moore, said that a miscalculation by Beijing could easily lead to war. And obviously, we spoke about China over the past few weeks. China's they've done mock-ups of our ships. They're I don't want to call it terrorism, but their computer hacking programs that they have over there, their growing military strength, and the party's desire to resolve the Taiwan issue by force if necessary, are all things that not only U.S. but obviously Britain has kept a close eye on. Obviously, terrorism. I would imagine that 9/11 still rings a bell throughout the world, but there's been the bombings in London, the bombings over in other places in Europe throughout the years now, where these European countries are just as big a targets as we are over here in the U.S. for terrorists. And the UK also continues to face an acute threat from Russia, he has said. So, it's just, I like to see articles like this. It kind of lets me know that we're not the only, we're not the only ones out there thinking, others are out to get us.
Yep.
It's good to see that the UK, I don't want to say it's good to see, but it's comforting maybe in a weird way that the UK also thinks that these same places are places we need to keep a watchful eye on.
Yeah. I mean, it's idealism that is not shared throughout the world. I actually watched a thing, and I'll put the link in here in a second. I watched a thing. Actually, rather, it's probably better to talk about it. It's called Prepare for Armageddon, China's Warning to the World, 60 Minutes Australia. It was published on November 14th of this year. So 60 Minutes Australia, Prepare for Armageddon. And they went out and interviewed a handful of people, Chinese politicians. They interviewed what I guess is the equivalent of like Secretary of Defense for Australia, a number of other people. And the long and short of it was they were talking about how does Australia respond to this threat, because Australia is a lot closer to China than, geographically than the United States is, or than anybody else is. And a couple of themes from that story were that, yes, China wants to annex Taiwan. They were talking to some Taiwanese locals who said, we don't want to be part of China. We're enjoying our democracy and we're enjoying our freedoms, and we don't want to be part of China. So it's kind of weird that in this whole conversation, these are people on an island nation who are recognizing their independence, and they're saying, we don't want to be part of you. And China's like, well, we want you to be part of us. And it's kind of like, well, what do you think happens when you try to annex them and they still don't want to be part of you? I mean, this reminds me of, let's go to the, one of the most noticeable things in history when the Germans were like, hey, Nazi Germany was like, hey, we're going to take over France. Well, we don't want to be part of you, Germany. And Germany's like, well, we don't care. You can't, let's just occupy and take over. And of course, back to the whole conversation, I realize what is the United States now did this a long time ago too. Human beings have been doing this to each other for thousands of years. The thing is that you're in a global economy now, you're in a global market now, and it's a nuclear armed global economy too. And so when you start pointing weapons at each other, it becomes pretty precarious. And you have a couple of world powers up against a couple of other world powers. And one of the guys did say, one of the Chinese politicians on this interview, he did say something along the lines of, or somebody said it, they said that China and the United States are too mutually beneficial to each other to even go to war. So the best thing that they could do, or the worst thing it could do, is a Cold War. The worst possible scenario would be Armageddon. It's nuclear war, but that's mutually assured destruction. Like that's the worst possible case scenario. It'd be foolish over annexing some land, right? It would be foolish to go to like global nuclear war. But the fact remains that United States and China are buying and selling from each other. And if you took that away, I don't know what it becomes to be friends. But I for some time, I thought it was a Trump versus China thing in the previous administration. And now I'm seeing Biden talking tough against China. Like, hey, you know what? If you go after Taiwan, we're coming after you. And that's like, man, I just don't like the sound of it. Now, the conspiracy theorist in me says, we have to be at a perpetual state of conflict. So now that Afghanistan is over and Iraq ended a few years ago, the interesting thing is that U.S. forces are still operating around the world at any given time. Like we're in conflict all over the place. Whether or not the news is talking about it, U.S. troops are in contact with enemies right now, somewhere in the world, in multiple places. You'd be surprised at how many places they are. But at the end of the day, it's a scary prospect. That our potential next conflict is with another world power. We've been fighting since World War II, and even probably World War II. I don't know if Germany really could have ever stood up to American production power, or Japan.
They were doing pretty darn good, but yeah,
they did. I mean, but if you think about it, like the Allies beat Germany in full-fledged battle in like a year and a half. I mean, from the D-Day invasion until the end of the war, it was a year. It was no more than 2 years, and the War of the Pacific was a little bit more spread out because it was in the Pacific. It was such a length, like a span of property that you had to get to each target objective. But it balanced out at first, and then the tides turned, when some of the Japanese carriers were taken out. So, even then, when we put our full might or full allied might behind some of these things, it took a couple of years to defeat some of the biggest powers. But you're talking about China. It has probably the largest military in the world. They are nuclear armed. They're friends with Russia. Russia doesn't have any, aside from military conflict, they don't want to go to war with us. We don't want to go to war with them. We don't do many dealings with them. It's not like they're our factory. China is the factory of the United States. All our stuff is produced there. So I think everybody has a lot to lose, but it's interesting this, prepare for Armageddon. China's warning to the world, 60 Minutes Australia, watch it. It's kind of interesting. It's somewhat frightening. It's a terrifying prospect that this is where we go. And, the everyman in me is kind of like, why can't we all just get along? We're both after the same things. We want our people to be safe and we want our economies to be good. So why are we pointing guns at each other? But
the countries like China, I understand that, man for man, they pose probably the biggest threat to our country, but I completely understand and get the fact that there is too much riding between the two countries that it just would never make sense because at the end of the day, most things come down to the almighty dollar. It's the countries like North Korea, where they might have that small man complex. Hey, we're just as big and bad as them. You should respect us and fear us just as much.
Right.
I worry about a leader of a country like that.
Yep.
Making a stupid decision and causing something to go haywire.
Yep.
Because if a place like North Korea did something and we attempted to step in, and let's say China said, no, not so fast, then at that point we're left, with a decision.
Right. And they did address in this article, in this interview for 60 Minutes Australia, they did address the more reasonable or rational, I shouldn't say reasonable or rational, but the more plausible route here is going to be, it is that electronic warfare. It's the financial terrorism. It's the economic terrorism. It's how do we steal billions of dollars from people or, wreak havoc on banking systems. That is, essentially nobody dies in that conflict, and you're able to try to screw up your enemy. And, some of this conversation was brought about when the whole COVID thing was rolling out. People were like, well, what is that? Is that a weapon? Is it a weaponized thing? I mean, it's still arguable that that's a potential outcome for all this. They're still trying to figure out the origin of this. I mean, how better to beat your enemies, without going to war, without posing nuclear threats to each other, than to, find backdoor ways to fight them.
Or cause infighting.
Like right. Proxy wars and things like that. Yeah. Right. Separate, divide and conquer.
Yep. If you have us battling each other to the point where, we're taking ourselves out.
Right.
They don't even have to step foot. And then just at one point they could step foot and say, oh man, you guys aren't nearly what you once were.
Right.
It's our turn now.
Yep. It's all interesting. It's just, again, the simpleton in me is like, well, why don't we just kind of shake hands and keep moving? I don't know. I know there are smarter people than me that understand the history in what's happening.
I'll break it down for you right now, Matt. It's like rap beef. 50 Cent gets in a rap beef with whoever and he sells more records. So, if we get a rap beef with
simple as that,
China, maybe we'll sell more oil. I don't know, but
yeah, right. I don't know. I mean, it comes down to it's the control of resources and the control of global economies. And on a micro level, or 100, 200, or 300 years ago, what this was who controls the water source, who controls, in the last 100 years, who controls the oil. 300 years ago is who has the most horses. It's all that stuff. And every time we go into conflict, people still argue, like, we went into Iraq because of oil. You know what? Let me answer this in a pretty succinct way. What if we did? What if that was control of resources, and we don't like it, and it's ugly, and people died, and everybody suffered from it? But what if the answer behind closed doors is, well, it's for control of resources? That's absolutely what happened, because we've been doing that. Humans have been doing that to each other for 1,000 years. So, it's not the easy answer that people like. We all want to break it down and be political about it, and we want to talk about why are these things happening? Well, it's happening because of X, Y, and Z. Well, I mean, what if the answer really is it comes down to who controls the stuff? Whoever controls the water and the oil and the global economy and the production wins. They win in the end. Now, this is all finite resources. Eventually, we run out of oil. We run out of production. We run out of fossil fuels. We run out of all this stuff. So you're winning for 100 years until it's gone, and then you got to figure out the next thing. Then you got to mine the asteroids for gold and diamonds. Lithium
seems to be the big one right now.
You're right. Well, because it can be used. There was an article that said that there was an asteroid that had trillions of dollars worth of gold on it or something like that, and it would essentially bankrupt the world because suddenly gold would be not worth anything because there'd be so much of it if they were able to mine this asteroid, which is kind of interesting to think. Like, we put value behind gold because it's rare, but what happens when it's not rare anymore?
Yeah, a little bit like Dune with the spice.
I have to watch that.
So
is that out yet? Is that movie out?
I know it was on HBO Max.
Okay,
that's where I was viewing.
I was
Dune,
I was doing some investigation on that movie just the other day. Like, should I watch this? And if so, where?
I will say that it didn't live up to my expectations, but
yeah,
overall good film. So
that's good.
But yeah, that's going to do it for us this week. Again, hope everybody had a fantastic Thanksgiving. If you are of the Jewish religion, happy Hanukkah. You got a few more days left. Enjoy those 8 crazy nights, as Adam Sandler says. You can check us out on all the major social media platforms, as well as all your major podcast listening platforms. Give us a like, rating, review, subscribe to the show. Check us out on YouTube as well. With that all being said, I think that's going to wrap us up. We're closing in on the Christmas holiday. Matt, I hope you got all your shopping done.
Not even close.
I'm
asking people what they want. Nobody's telling me anything. And what's going to happen is nothing's going to be available. So it's all sitting on a ship.
You know what? Yeah, that's what you can just chalk it up to. Supply chain shortages.
Yep.
Couldn't get nobody nothing this year. So.
I am notorious for, it's the 15th. I'm late. Yeah. And then I'm too late. Then I'm doing like last minute shopping. So yeah.
I hear you. So yeah, I'm always like the night or two before Christmas finish wrapping up stuff. I'm like, God.
Yeah. Can Amazon do next day delivery? I actually did. We ordered some things years ago on Amazon 2-day, and this is before Amazon had figured out its own logistics, which then led to them having their own vans thereafter. But this was UPS promising that their UPS and Postal Service and FedEx promising things would get there on this day or that. And then they were like 2 days late. And I remember distinctly on the news, Amazon was pissed. Like, you promised us this. Now we're just going to not use you. We're going to buy our own airplanes and vans and do it ourselves.
Yep. There you go.
Interesting stuff.
So anyways, check us out on all those platforms. Give us a like, rating, review. Tell a friend, tell a family member. And until next week, we'll see you right back here on Beyond the Wire.